According to ACPA and NASPA, professional competency areas for student affairs educators, developing understandings of globalization and international perspectives are core competencies for student affairs administrators. However, Schultz et al. Indicated graduate students in higher education and student affairs preparation programs often have limited opportunities to participate in a study abroad experience. Scholars, including Schultz et al. And Wachowski and Mendez, have recommended including short-term study abroad opportunities in higher education and student affairs program curricula. These opportunities could increase students' intercultural development, knowledge of different educational systems, and understandings of their own social identities and positionalities. This video shares findings from a collaborative autoethnography that focused on how storytelling, as a pedagogical practice, influenced student learning during a short-term study abroad program. This course focused on community-based learning and study abroad practices that was sponsored by the Northern Illinois University Higher Education Program. The course included a week-long in-country experience in Bucerias, Mexico, and the surrounding area, and it was buttressed by online coursework, pre- and post-experience. The in-country host was Human Connections, a nonprofit organization focused on educational and social responsible travel experiences. Using a collaborative autoethnography approach, 3 students and the faculty member that led the program engaged in individual and group interviews. According to Chang et al., a collaborative autoethnography is, quote, a qualitative research method that is simultaneously collaborative, autobiographical, and ethnographic, end quote. For us, this means that we were able to explore differences and commonalities, our own experiences compared to the larger group experience and cultural context. The following shares findings from our collaborative autoethnography that focused on storytelling as a community-based learning, perspective-taking, exploration of power and privilege, and engaging and fostering critical reflection. Storytelling is the act of mutually sharing personal narratives between students and the community members they meet, as indicated by Landrum et al. In community-based learning programs like Study Abroad. Engaging with the stories and environments of community members expands participants' worldviews, creating more globally aware and engaged students, according to Hartman and his associates.
That was just a very cool experience. And I think it was also very interesting to get to hear their story as we're seeing their product and walking through it and everything. It made it more kind of tactile and physical, and to kind of get to meet all of them as well. We got to see the different perspectives of their experience as well, and I thought that was very cool.
Seeing that not only they melded like community and their passion together, the community supporting them week after week, and they're using their passion to do something that they love for the community, that stuck out to me. And then being able to consume their delicious food.
There's this piece around humanizing, right? Like, how are we humanizing? It's easy to be critical of people and when we don't know them than it is when we have opportunities to connect.
Perspective taking, as Johnston and Lopez indicated, is the ability to identify, evaluate, and apply different cultural and ethical worldviews. Perspective taking is important for student affairs administrators as it allows them to better understand the different cultural backgrounds, experiences, and worldviews of students, both domestic and international, that they will work with.
Because when like Fatima says she's not in school, she just helps and things like that, it just kind of made me feel a little bit sad for her. Cause like, you know, me, I'm like, oh yeah, everyone should be going to school. Like everyone, like this is normal. This is something you should do. But that's not how everyone lives. And that's okay. Like just because it's normalized in this culture, like in the like US, doesn't mean that the way we live is right, and it doesn't mean anyone else is wrong.
You know, as particularly a white American, there's just like growing up so many stereotypes, assumptions, and biases, especially within the last several years, that relate to just Mexico as a whole. And so I think a main thing personally was that it subverted a lot of those stereotypes, and I think made me feel a lot more connected as well to the stories that some of my close friends talk about being from Mexico.
You know, this photo says workshop with Dulce. Dulce was great. Like, Dulce had her kids there. Like, she was telling us about her life, her story. It would have been great to connect with more locals that work at Entre Amigos and hear their story a little bit more as well. Because I think just the connection with Dulce, and I think we met like one other person that was just random. They weren't on the schedule. That's how we learned about having to travel to grocery. Like, we would have never known some of these details. And that is very huge, right? That's very huge to know. So what if we didn't meet Dulce? What if we didn't meet the one other individual? We wouldn't have known some of these personal narratives, and that is a part of what facilitating a socially just study abroad program is about.
Student affairs educators need to understand how power, privilege, and oppression mediates individuals' personal and educational experiences. ACPA and NASPA Social Justice and Inclusion Area of Professional Competency states student affairs educators need to understand, quote, their own agency and social responsibility that includes others, their community, and the larger global context, end quote. Storytelling during a short-term study abroad experience can prompt student affairs educators' reflection on power and privilege and their own agency and social responsibility.
Hearing how she really sacrificed for her kids to go to school, I mean, it's something that really touches me, because I feel like there are times that we're in the US that we take education for granted, that as in that something that people have to work so hard for is really something that for us comes so easily and really is really mandatory by like the law.
Even with meeting with the founder, there was some lack of accountability when it comes to the impact that the local community has had with this center. Yes, let's focus on the good. But I think even when asked about, hey, did you have a town hall before building the structure, before making it, a whole thing? And then learning that the locals did not were not happy maybe with the original foundation of how this all started. It didn't sound like folks were happy when it came to the bigger building of it. And for me, was that pushback because long term folks didn't know what it would look like. And now we see what it looks like. Folks have to drive 40 minutes to get groceries. That in itself stood out of like, you still don't see from your lens as a Caucasian, like, you are a white woman and you don't see the impact.
Especially when being at Entre Amigos, I think that was one of the sites where I was really reflecting on my identities and my privilege and how I was kind of moving through the space, particularly how in an area that has so many expats, those are people that look like me. I feel like a lot of times they say, how can I use my privilege? And I'm like, well, in that scenario, they overused their privilege, because by using it so much, like, they ended up pushing the opinions and beliefs of the local community to the side. And so for me, I think I was more so like, this is a good spot, I think, for me to sit back and just learn rather than lead conversations.
Critical self-reflection is a continuous meaning-making practice where students reflect on their experiences abroad while questioning personal positionality and assumptions, power imbalances and privilege, and hegemonic assumptions and narratives. Hartman et al. State that the goals of critical self-reflection is to intentionally increase personal cultural humility and work toward the systemic change of power imbalances and false dominant narratives.
All of these stories made me do a lot of reflection on what is showing up here in the US, but also to what can be done to change it. Because I know, coming from a dominant culture, quote unquote, that it always seems like everyone else, every other country is like lacking but that's far from the truth.
The taco tour in Puerto Vallarta, our tour guide was great. I didn't know he would add that much history about Puerto Vallarta, about just how tourism has impacted the area where we are lodging, surrounded by expats, surrounded by condos in Busarias. So then going 30 minutes or so to Puerto Vallarta and seeing like how much more it's impacted there, and kind of like the pros and like the good and bad that comes with that. Stimulating the economy, but also what does that mean for pushing out locals and folks that are there?
Understanding so much more of these systems and structures that can kind of like influence some of that perception as to why some of these views are happening in the US, but also understanding more so how people have persevered through certain aspects in the system. We always say, as Americans are trying to create a better life for ourselves, they are as well, because they're human and they want better lives for their kids and their families and their friends. Everybody in this conversation was, didn't necessarily believe those kind of stereotypes that people in the government have kind of placed on the Mexican community. But it was also like, I think, so much better than just like having read it in a book, but to actually get to meet these people and to also kind of bring that back and be like, I met this amazing person and people, and really got to spend time in this community.
Curriculum and pedagogical choices shape and foster opportunities for students to engage in critical reflection. This allows for students to make meaning and develop more comprehensive understandings of their learning, which includes evaluating and reflecting on previously held beliefs and understandings. While this is often done through reflective writing, there are other pedagogical practices that can help foster critical reflection for students.
As educators, we differentiate formal and informal, and I'm not always sure students differentiate in the same way, right? Like, I'm wondering if, right, like it's more holistic. I guess I'm curious around what felt like differences or extensions for you between those kind of spaces.
Definitely in the formal spaces, still not knowing. There was 8 of us, but still not knowing everyone. Like, we either met at the airport or like in Mexico. So I think like everyone was still a little rehearsed. Like, I'll speak for myself. Like, yeah, we're thinking, we're processing, but I just experienced whatever I'm sharing with you maybe 2 hours ago, maybe 3 hours ago, and so I'm not fully thought out. But when I'm, you know, the next day, like walking on the beach with someone, or that night, like having a little bit more time to process, I'm not in as formal of a setting as like someone's living room. Like, yes, it was still relaxed, but not really. Again, I don't know everyone, so there's still a little bit of a wall up, but I think as like the wall dropped, like whether I'm more one-on-one with someone or it's like 2 other people, the group is smaller, it's more intimate. I think that's where it, like, I was able to open up differently.
What felt formal were the parts that were required by class because I felt like I was graded. And so in those more informal settings, which I think also was helped by there being less people, so it did feel more intimate, like in the pool or at like dinner, when we had like a free night for dinner, um, that there wasn't that kind of pressure on it. I think also because we would incorporate more of our like lives and history because we also were trying to get to know each other more and felt like we had more time for that. But I think having the formal settings, it kind of forced me to be much more engaged throughout the entire program because there was like this expectation that we're going to talk about it later or we're going to be writing a paper at the end. And I think if you compare it to like a kind of independent semester abroad or something, not having that expectation means that there's so much more that you can miss if you're not being super intentional about being actively engaged and reflecting.
Through hearing the stories of various local community partners, key concepts from course readings related to the practice of study abroad and community-based learning were illuminated. Through these interactions, we were able to understand nuances in educational systems, the importance of relationship building in community-based education and organizing, as well as reflected upon our own social identities and positionality. Moreover, social interactions with community partners helped foster critical self reflection for us in both formal and informal ways. Ultimately, storytelling within community based learning and study abroad helped humanize individuals that may have life experiences different than our own. Developing compassion, understanding, and perspective taking is fundamental to the work of student affairs educators who have to be competent in working with individuals from various cultural and social backgrounds.